External competitiveness. The second policy we will examine is the external competitiveness, which compares an organization's pay policies, which were developed during the internal alignment phase, to those of the competitors. In some previous discussions we've had, we talked about what as the worker we personally would like to see as a pay mix. And then we got into the conversation about if we were the employer, what would we like to offer? And a lot of people, answered with more like a work-life balance or more respect in the office place. And those are all great. But in reality, it comes down to these two things. Businesses are put in place to control the costs and increase revenues, and also attract and retain employees. So that is why you develop a compensation system. So this is needed to take the advantage over your competitors to win in the market share. And these are the things we're going to be focusing on in this module. Here are two different markets that affect the pay levels of an organization. Obviously, the labor market, it is something you would expect to see. But we're also going to take a look at how the product market affects the pay level of an organization. And these are all the things that you have to factor in when you are creating your external alignment and seeing what the competitors are doing. The labor market can be broken down into a simple supply and demand. The demand is what does the market demand for the new hires? How many new hires does the employer need to employ? And what are they willing and able to pay the new employees? And then on the other hand, you have the supply. So what kind of qualifications do these employees have? What type of business is it going into? Is it IT? What kind of training are they getting? Is it manual labor? What kind of skills do they have? The qualifications of the applicants or the supply. And also what affects the supply is what the applicants are willing to accept for the pay. Does that meet what the demand is or what the employers are able to pay? And as usual, it is now time for the Ask the Experts section of our lecture for this evening. And we are going to start off with 3 different theories that affect the market demand. And they are compensation differentials, efficiency wage theory, and signaling. Now, I'm sure when you've read this, hopefully you've read the text already, you're going to think about this and say, this makes sense. It's common sense. But it's also really important to put this down on paper and really think about this when you're creating compensation plans. And what they simply say here is compensation differentials, meaning the harder someone has to work at achieving the qualifications for a job, or if the job is undesirable, you're going to have to pay them more to do that job. Efficiency wage, this one is interesting. And the theorists say that the higher you pay an employee, the more efficient they will work because they are less likely to shirk or fool around because they like the higher wage and they are leery of losing their position. So the higher the pay, the more efficient your workers will work for you. And then the last one we're going to look at that will affect the demand is the signaling theory. And this simply says that an employer can communicate the type of behavior they expect from their employees by signaling with their wages. Higher wages, meaning you have higher expectations. And this also helps with advertising to applicants if they're going to join this organization. And that also has a sorting effect too, you know, who will apply for the job depending on the compensation or the culture of the compensation that an organization has, their reputation. On the labor market supply side or the employee side, there are two theories that are discussed here. And the one is the reservation wage theory, stating that, you know, what is the lowest acceptable wage for a specific job. And then with the human capital theory, that focuses more on the pay should be equivalent to the effort it takes to achieve the qualifications to do that job. In addition to the labor market, where we are competing for top talent to bring their best efforts to our organization, we're also competing in the product market, which will have a direct relationship to the amount that we can pay, our pay levels. So as you can see here, we have our pay level is equal to the product demand plus the degree of competition. So if we have a larger market share of our product and some other factors go in, like keeping labor costs down, we can actually increase our pay level to attract and retain top talent. Now that we have the fundamentals of external competitiveness under our belt, we want to start to look at putting this into play. So what do we start with? So we're going to start with pay surveys. Now, pay surveys are a collection of data that just helps us know what, with a good guess or some definitive information, what our competitors are paying. And some rules of thumb is you want to make sure that the data you are using is valid. So you want to test the validity. And you want to make sure that you're collecting data from several different ways, different collection processes, or different organizations collecting the data for you. And then another best practice is compare your data to several sources. Again, that brings us back to the validity. We want to make sure that this is valid and reliable information, because this is going to be our starting point for our compensation pay level plan. I know at this point everyone is really excited because now we have stepped into our statistical analysis portion of this evening. Do not all start cheering at once. We're going to break it down rather simply here and simply say we're going to look at this data to figure out if we are going to lead, lag, or match the pay levels of our competition. So you can get really into the statistical analysis, or you can do what I do, pay someone to do it for you. Essentially, what we're trying to glean from this data is to figure out what the pay levels are and create a pay policy line, which is a representation of the organization's pay level. The pay level policy relative to what the competitors pay for similar jobs. That's it, comparing our jobs to their jobs and figuring out should we lead, lag, or match. Step 3, we see where the internal alignment and the external competitiveness intersect. So at this point, we have to make a decision on how we are going to organize our internal jobs and attach a wage or range of wages to those jobs. And we have two choices here. We can use pay grades and ranges or broadbanding. A pay grade groups similarly valued jobs together, while the range is the span of pay for that grade. We often hear, oh, that's above my pay grade. So, and this is a good format to use. It's used by many organizations. There's flexibility in pay. You have your range of salaries within the pay grade, so you can adjust for the skill level. Say you have you have several jobs. You have your beginner, your intermediate, and your more advanced level within that same range. So that does allow for some adjustment as your employees learn new skills. However, it can get cumbersome to work with in large organizations. Many pay grades and ranges can be developed. And then also, it's also difficult to manage employee movement sometimes. And with that, I mean, if you are cross-training for different types of jobs, especially in today's world, we are trying to consolidate and cut out some middle management. So if you're someone who kind of spans both pay grades, there's kind of a lot of shades of gray. So sometimes that becomes a little difficult to manage. So an alternative to the pay grades and ranges are broad bands, and as the name suggests, they are broader bands. So they are including more jobs within an organization. They are grouped together in a larger band. There's still a range of salaries within that band, but just as they are wider, they are taller as well. This allows for much more flexibility within the organization. This is great for organizations who people wear many different hats, where there's cross-training or there's cross-divisional work. You're not stuck in a more rigid pay grade. There's more flexibility. And this is easier for employees to move laterally from one department or another and do work, and they can still work through their career path. It leads a little bit more to that. So they're on the cons, though, because it's kind of a little looser situation. Some theorists say that it does lead to, it can lead to favoritism or inequity in the pay, and of course that has many repercussions. And then too broad of the bands can lead to confusion as to where you should place certain jobs in an organization, or where do they fall if they span over two. To wrap up this section of external competitiveness, I want you to remember that to start this out, we need to develop a strong internal alignment policies, have the objectives for your organization, how you want to pay your employees and what message you want that to send, what kind of behaviors are you trying to pull from your employees with your compensation policies. And then you want to use reliable data to compare what is going out there in the marketplace, what are your competitors doing, and then you're going to select your method to determine your pay levels, whether it be broadbanding or pay grades and ranges. And once you have that in place, you're ready to move on.